this UFOs all over the world.
La cámara de video fue grabado en una cinta de 2 pulgadas. Este objeto, que a plena luz del día atraviesa la ciudad de Guatemala. El camarógrafo Manuel Juárez, del Canal 3 de Guatemala, fue capaz de seguirlo durante 53 segundos. La grabación se obtuvo durante la realización de un comercial donde se vendía un automóvil. Repentinamente el camarógrafo, a simple vista, se da cuenta que se trata de un objeto raro, que no es un avión o un helicóptero y que se mueve en una dirección. En un principio se observa claramente, aunque no se le ve forma. Más tarde queda oculto detrás de unos árboles. Sin embargo, el camarógrafo, consciente de que estaba captando a un verdadero ovni, lo esperó y lo continuó grabando hasta que se perdió. En el final del video se puede observar a otros testigos que seguían al objeto. No obstante, sería hasta el final de la década de los 80 cuando la cámara portátil de videotape llegaría a las manos de millones de personas en todo el mundo. Y es entonces cuando se abre la posibilidad de demostrar la presencia del fenómeno ovni y la posibilidad de que se trate de naves de otros planetas, venidas desde el espacio profundo del universo. En 1989 y 90, en Bélgica, miles de personas aseguran haber sido testigos de la presencia de ovnis, y algunos de ellos graban videos, como el que ya habíamos presentado, el famoso video del ovni triangular de Bélgica. En esta toma se pueden observar los movimientos del ovni cerca de una estrella, a la que se puede situar como un punto de referencia. En ocasiones, el ovni pasa frente a la estrella y la oculta. Así podemos determinar sus movimientos, imposibles para un avión, para cualquier avión. En esta otra toma podemos observar la forma del aparato. No olvide estas imágenes, tanto la forma triangular como el plano horizontal. Más tarde se encontraría un parecido extraordinario al ovni que ha venido siendo observado en la zona de Metepec y Atlisco, en Puebla. El video se ha convertido en el símbolo de la oleada ovni en Bélgica. El video fue grabado por un aficionado que llevaba su cámara en su automóvil y pudo captar estas extraordinarias imágenes. En Tbilisi, Georgia, en la comunidad de estados independientes, antes Unión Soviética, fue grabado este video en diciembre de 1990. Se puede observar a un gran objeto que parece ser triangular, de gran dimensión y que se encuentra inclinado. Vea usted con cuidado. No se trata de ninguna nave conocida. Además, se puede escuchar la excitación de la familia que videograbó las imágenes. Incluso niños que responden a la excitación de sus padres. El objeto permaneció estático durante muchos minutos antes de desaparecer. Existen muchas preguntas y pocas respuestas en realidad. Sin embargo, ahora contamos con evidencia. Decenas de personas han sido capaces de grabar videotapes que muestran extraños objetos como flotando sobre las ondas magnéticas del planeta o extrañas luces que se mueven a una velocidad extraordinaria o grandes luces que se mueven lentamente sobre las ciudades sin que prácticamente nadie se dé cuenta. Nunca antes en la historia se habían registrado tantas tendencias en tan poco tiempo. De acuerdo al testimonio de algunos investigadores, en México, gracias al geotape, se han reunido más imágenes de objetos voladores no identificados en movimiento que en los últimos 40 años de historia del fenómeno. El arribo de la cámara portátil del geotape ha permitido registrar por primera vez lo que tantos testigos aseguraban haber visto y no podían probar. En los próximos años veremos cada vez con más frecuencia y calidad videos grabados en todo el mundo. El desarrollo tecnológico permitirá develar una realidad que aún se pretende mantener como un misterio. Estas son las tendencias presentadas al público en su totalidad por primera ocasión.
Las predicciones de Analiza
para cumplir una misión de observación. Gran diámetro y tamaño era una nave nodriza, similar a esta, avistada hace 10 años en Querétaro, México. Esto dejó todos los radares, bases aéreas y puertos muy cercanos. Aquella noche se ha podido ser identificado por un reconocido usuario internacional, varios agarradores, móviles de forma lenticular.
Lo que estamos viendo en la, digamos, en la cámara congelada podemos ver un objeto perfectamente simétrico, o sea, de forma lenticular y con sus extremos perfectamente delimitados y una cúpula en el medio. Se ve que hay un momento en que pasa detrás de los arbustos el objeto. Y si ustedes se dan cuenta, hay un momento en que el objeto lanza un fogonazo muy fuerte.
De la nave que se desprende.
Exactamente. Y en el momento que se desprende ese objeto que en la terminología científica ufológica se llama careta, que es una especie de sonda o ojo de observación. O sea, la llamada nave nodriza o nave madre, que es de donde se desprenden estas anexas, espera hacia el lado izquierdo, se pone foco estático y en el momento en que se separan y, digamos, analizan el terreno de estas ondas, ¿no? Hay una posibilidad, teoría que se ha dicho que el Perú es una serie de bases submarinas que están en las afueras de Pisco, de Guardiey y de...
para aclararnos que nosotros nos encontramos con científicos humanos que no eran. Doctor, ¿qué les parece esta imagen? Es verdaderamente impresionante, ¿no?
Es muy impresionante por esta parte y felicito a Frecuencia Latina porque creo que es el canal que ha marcado la historia el día de ayer y el día de hoy, porque es el primer canal latinoamericano que ha filmado durante 40 minutos, casi una hora, un ovni en pleno vuelo. Es un hecho histórico que tiene que ser resaltado en forma
En México yo creo que también tenemos objetos similares.
bastante similar, pero la observación no duró más de 2 minutos. En este caso, creo que va a ser un estudio de muchos especialistas, porque en ese primer caso, en un programa de televisión, un canal de televisión en América Latina, filma durante casi una hora un objeto volador no identificado.
¿Esto qué galaxia pertenecería?
Bueno, según las investigaciones que he realizado durante 10 años, en la zona, digamos, de las observaciones que se han hecho de estas naves, proceden, según los contactados, un programa de de la Afganines, que son naves longitudinales con una cúpula en la parte superior.
¿Y cómo son estos seres extraterrestres?
Según las manifestaciones de los testigos, incluso han fotografiado a estos seres, a uno de ellos en la grabación de la década del 80, una revista muy conocida, puso una portada y decía extraterrestre fotografía de una caguasa. Entonces se vio prácticamente el bote se parece bastante a esta foto que se tomó en Marte, una llamada en Quinto, donde se fotografió una cara en 2 kilómetros de largo por 10 metros de alto, perfectamente delimitado.
¿Qué tamaño tendría que ser?
No solo ustedes se van a aclarar que estos animales tienen una altura de 3 metros a 5 metros, en una interpretación fotográfica que se han hecho.
¿Por qué tantos avistamientos como estos?
Porque la segunda, justamente porque se está produciendo lo que se llama una oleada de avistamientos, como pasaron en la década de 40 en Estados Unidos, como hoy está en Francia, en los 60 y en España, y en la década de los 80 parece que Perú es el centro del poder magnético. Y estas líneas magnéticas y estas naves, por el manejo de energías de gran campo electromagnético, se utilizan para poder viajar por estos corredores electromagnéticos.
Ahora, como se parecen esas naves que no generan energía, ¿eso es lo que es positiva o es negativa?
Incluso en los casos que hemos ahora estado investigando, se ve que los aparatos electrónicos se alteran el paso de estas naves, que producen una corriente, un campo magnético muy fuerte, llamado efecto electromagnético.
¿No nos debe sorprender que veamos más naves extraterrestres en nuestro cielo?
No, no debería sorprendernos, incluso podría dar una sugerencia podría ser porque generalmente cuando estamos llegando a una etapa del fin del milenio, se sabe de que muchas instancias superiores van a soltar una gran cantidad de información referente a estas naves o estos planos misteriosos. Y yo haría una recomendación final a las personas que harían una pequeña videograbadora y videocámaras que puedan tener la simple vista para avistar a partir de las 10 de la noche en muchos lugares de Lima, se van a seguir dando estos avistamientos. Hay que estar atentos para este tipo de videos.
Doctor, muy amable, muchas gracias por estas informaciones que a todos les interesa.
Y hagamos de forma referencial parte del tendido eléctrico de la calle. Un acercamiento permite advertir que se trata de un objeto de forma irregular cuya dimensión varía con el espacio. Según se afirma, el objeto luminoso se acercaba y alejaba del punto de observación.
Hemos salido a la puerta y hemos visto a la altura de una de los vecinos un grupo grande, rojo, ¿no? O sea, de colores. Entonces digo, mira, Fabi, dice, hay un color, mejor no sé, de que mejor lo filmamos. Y yo lo que he hecho, con mi cámara y es una estrategia. A ver, la filmación y traté de enfocar lo más que podía para ver.
La señora Valera manifestó que nunca antes tuvo un contacto visual considerado el tercer tipo.
Con la televisión, pero nunca me imaginé que me iba a suceder a mí, ¿no?
Una vez pensó, digamos, la posibilidad de que sea algo real que todos soliciten.
Si fuera real, eso sería que con gente de manera al mundo, ¿no? Con buenas intenciones, ¿no?
¿Usted ha visto? ¿Está segura que no hay ningún objeto conocido, un avión, un helicóptero?
No era un avión ni era un globo lo que nosotros pensábamos, ¿no? Pero al haber acercamiento de la filmadora y después de ver la televisión, sabiendo la forma y captando todos los movimientos hasta en cámara lenta, nos dimos cuenta que era algo raro, ¿no?
El objeto volador se mantuvo durante más de una hora sobre el cielo, ligeramente nublado de la capital, hasta que súbitamente se alejó y se perdió de vista.
De 2:30 más o menos ahora ese lapso hasta las 2 de la mañana. O sea, entre que se acercaba y se alejaba, ¿no?
Ese era el movimiento que se acercaba. Las constantes visitas que seguía una flotilla de ovnis ha puesto en alerta a todos los vecinos que cámara en mano esperan captarlas. Ahora, solo usted, amigo televidente, juzgará estas imágenes.
El objeto no identificado había sido también observado por algunos policías que patrullaban.
Cerca de la 1 de la madrugada, una serie de incidentes sobrevolando el sur de Characo alarmó un vecino del pueblo público. Para los moradores de esta pequeña municipal, estamos sucediendo cerca de 2 minutos de firmamento, pertenecían a un objeto volador no identificado.
Ovalado, tres colores, cuatro colores, no me puede decir, el de verde, amarillo, un rojo, un verde o un celeste. Estaba ahí, paradito, estacionado.
Se hizo un plato así y con 3 colores, azul, rojo y verde. Aprovechó un buen
Un minuto y medio, aproximadamente un minuto y medio, y después se bajó y ya no se dio más. Larga espera, lo único que apareció en el cielo, pero aviones y el equipo de la noche de alta tensión, que a lo lejos podían ser confundidos por estos ovnis. Lo que me está produciendo ahora en Perú, en la selección del Perú, sobre todo en Lima, es una oleada de avistamientos. Eso es seguidillas de avistamientos casi hay muchísimos focos de información, y ellos valoran el gran esfuerzo que ha hecho nuestro país para resolver sus diferencias. Es un foco de tensión menos de mundo. He tenido la más telefónica en Ecuador, en donde los mismos avistamientos que estamos teniendo hoy en todas las fronteras. En este país ya sobre sociedades.
También señaló que los ovnis están constantemente a la vista, pero la poca costumbre de observar el cielo y la falta de preparación en estos casos impide que el contacto con lo desconocido sea cada vez más amplio.
Las religiones podrían verse de alguna manera afectadas porque los fieles dirían, ¿por qué nunca se lo mismo que teníamos hermanos como hermanos? Sin embargo, el Evangelio dice en la actualidad, muchas moradas, y tengo veces en la clase a nadie le debe resultar que sea con los hermanos a los niños y que somos una familia real. No somos el último ni el primero en la familia. No por ello nos amamos.
Este sería uno de los lugares de ingreso de sonido en el sexto paso a todas los años. Estas extrañas luces de forma extraña, las mismas que se introducieron cuando disolviéndose entre las nubes. Por ese entonces, este sargento de la policía de Chica contó su propia experiencia.
Y luego de años como 10, 15 meses de la fila, el cerebro fue eliminado.
Pero las imágenes más impactantes captadas en febrero son las que pertenecen a Jaime Mecano, camarógrafo de nuestro centro de noticias, quien registró estas extrañas luces suspendidas en el espacio por más de 20 minutos. Sin alterar su boquilla, a pesar de la presencia de aviones por la zona, logró captar de cerca uno de los objetos. Esto ocurrió en la madrugada del 12 de febrero. Esa misma noche, estas escenas fueron captadas por Sixto Paz en Relato del Mar. Y estas fotografías fueron tomadas también por Sixto Paz hace solo 2 noches en Monterrey. Es posible que la fiebre ovni continúe en los próximos días, por lo que es necesario seguir algunas normas que permitan un avistamiento más exacto.
La recomendación en este momento para la cultura de observación del cielo es que deben tratar de conseguirse unos veros binoculares o unos binoculares que le permitan a uno acercar la observación al máximo. Tomar puntos de referencia, entonces de distintos ángulos para comparar lo que es un objeto volador no identificado sobre el
Tiene el privilegio de ver un ovni.
realmente fue cuando éramos bastante niños, porque en Marruecos se veía también muchísimo este tipo de objetos. Tengo la ventaja de que mi padre vive en compulsiva, en estado de meditación profunda, de escribir inmediatamente. Yo no le di mucha importancia hasta la raíz, pero mi madre y mi hermana, sobre todo mi hermana, se llamó tanto que me llamó por teléfono a los amigos, pidiendo a mi novia, a mi mamá, en entonces me a mi esposa, a mi hija, y me dijo, y dijo justamente lo que había ocurrido. Al día siguiente había 20 personas en la sala de la casa, y todo el mundo me presionó para que repitiéramos el experimento. Yo no quería hacerlo porque no quería ni engañarme yo ni engañar a nadie, no como que era ridículo para mí de imaginación. Pero probamos y puedo ver que en ese segundo supuesto mensaje, ese ser nos invita para que fuéramos a 60 kilómetros al sur de Lima, a un lugar en el desierto que nos sirve. Porque el 7 de febrero del año 74 a las 9 de la noche queríamos aparecer con él. Fuimos al lugar de un viaje, no puede ser de que nos confundiéramos con el teoría, un cartel de un avión. Y llega el día de la cita, lo había indicado, el avión atravesado, muchachos, entre los 16 y los 20 años, todos allí mirando el cielo, cuando de pronto trae los cerros, que pueden estar pasando, Por caso segundo se vivió la noche en los tres. El grupo estaba disperso y empezó a congregar. Uno con otro empezamos a confrontar. ¿Tú ves esa luz que será? Cuando el sol se cae los cerros, asomó una luz potentísima que empezó a desplazarse por las crestas de la montaña y quedó sobre el horizonte a la derecha. En ese momento alguien dijo que estaba bien. El tren decía el luz, empezó a balancear, empezó a avanzar, y claro, iba avanzando, todos íbamos a proseguir. Luego a colocarse, calculamos unos 80 a 100 metros encima de todo. Ya no es una luz, es una fiesta en forma de luz, una media de 30.000. Y proyectó la luz como donde vivía encima nuestro. En ese momento sentimos pánico, terror, nunca habíamos visto tanto miedo. Y entonces algunos de mis compañeros, sinceramente, me decían, sí, oye, que se vaya, sigo como una con él. Yo decía que si yo no sé cómo funciona, lo último que yo imagino que para hablar, ¿sabes quién es todo el mundo? Que todos hemos pasado esta mente, como que nos hablaban a oír, o decían, que no saben, que no estamos preparados. Que había una preparación, que yo tenía, como había un minuto y luego se empezó a hablar. Cantamos el piano, trabajamos de todo, pero yo no lo podía hacer, porque yo en un grupo de muchachos intrascendentes, de un país trascendentalista, y vamos a poner experiencia con él. Llegamos a pensar que de pronto, como del espacio, y no se ve que los países sean diferentes, por ahora encontramos que se pone Gomorra, llegaron 3 extraterrestres, o ángeles, entretenidos, y amenazando con destruir esta ciudad, y le dijeron a Abraham, vemos que estos seres, si bien hablan de amor, para ellos el amor es el bien común, y por el bien común es que lo mejor para todos es que un pueblo desaparezca completo, ellos se ven que el pueblo va a desaparecer. Entonces, esa diferencia entre ellos y nosotros, eso es la gran diferencia con el pueblo, muestra que si unos seres humanos somos capaces también de lo más terrible acto de humanidad, también somos capaces de lo más sublime acto de amor y emprendimiento. Y ese contraste son los que estos seres también les llama la atención. Ellos tienen un alto nivel de evolución, pero para ciertas cosas son como muy cuadriculados, como muy mentales. Y es que eso forma parte del grupo. O sea, no existe fácil contactado precisamente. Yo soy un grupo y es como ideal, pero hay muchos grupos en el mundo que han tenido ese contacto con el mundo. Que ha hecho otra competencia de experiencia. Ahora, en el año 74, cuando empezamos los lanzamientos y los contactos, al mes de octubre de ese año, la nave aterriza y me vino a bajar al tripulante. El centro bajó, medía 2 metros y medio. Tenía el pelo corto, el color platinado. Lo que pasa es que nosotros vimos de inicio de la edad de 2 razas diferentes seres. Hoy día sabemos que son por lo menos 60 civilizaciones diferentes que están llegando a la Tierra con las más variadas intenciones. La gente que viene de un planeta de estrellas cercanas, Centauro o Alfa Centauro, viven en 2 metros de medio, el pelo corto, el color platinado. No, la gente es enorme, es escandinavo. La gente que viene de Valencia, donde no hay vida natural, no hay vida artificial, no hay la gente tiene contacto directo ni iniciando contacto, o sea, sale con variedad de dedo, con la hija adaptada de esta artificial, entonces tiene un efecto más oriental, pero mira, no menos un paciente con no, estos son los seres que vienen de un lugar que se llama Chile. Este ser, estaba anotando en un cuaderno de una nota para la profesora. Cuando entonces quisiera hacer compulsivas de escribir lo que venía a la mente. Entonces, lo puso ahí, me llamo por teléfono un trabajo, necesito ir a los ya en la casa de origen, tratamos de estar controlados sobre el consultamos en grupo, para que todas las personas que habían recibido el caso consultaran sin saber qué era lo que había recibido. Entonces, por uno, continuando, y veamos que se encuentra ciudadano. Uno para que seguimos por la ciudad de Santo Domingo de los Reyes, no podemos ver los dos primeros, llegamos a lugar los encuentros y estaba con otras personas cuando el plan de cerro pasó la nave, pasó encima de esto y lanzó más de luz y salió de forma obliqua. En ese momento, quedé como paralizado, una luz como un metro y medio de color azul intenso. Y de eso terminó una vez, por más que digamos que no me va a contar con un tiempo, hay como alzado. En ese momento no pasaba ni un minuto, estoy cerrando y bajo mío una especie de cocina de la alcantarilla de los trenes que habíamos hecho con 3 filtros de contención. A mí pasando en intensidad de la luz, pude ver que esta en un cristal así como en forma de teatro, hacia abajo, Y al bajar, han depositado por esta etapa, recuerda un salón circular abovedado con muchas rectangulares rojas, empieza a poner fe, tenía el cuerpo agarrotado por la televisión, por más que no sepa que son buena gente, siempre lo tiene temor de conocer. Traté de ir avanzando y pude observar el lado izquierdo, ligeramente por encima de él, había una puerta ovalada abierta al movimiento. Me he metido hacia allí, empalmando el exterior de la rampa. Me subí en ella, me acerqué hacia la puerta, me puse espaldas a la pared, no me atrevía a quedar en ella. Pero cuando ya lo pude hacer, vi que esto comunicaba con un pequeño pared hexagonal, con falso techo, compuesto como por pirámides invertidas. Es un color, una nave de las pequeñas que vienen para grande nave. La habitación hexagonal, del lado derecho y izquierdo, habían 3 niveles de pantalla, varias pantallas en 3 niveles, y lo curioso es que estas pantallas en vez de ser convexas con la Tierra, eran plan redondas, y las paredes tenían 3 escritorios blancos, y eran historias blancas. Me salgo de la habitación y he podido fijar muchos estos detalles porque 2 veces más entré la misma vez, ese mismo año, al año siguiente. En esa primera ocasión, en una parte, una hora que me allí,
hijo de varios ayuntamientos, desde Perú hasta Rusia. Captaron imágenes de estos objetos muy explicados. En Italia, una fecha fue captar 2 ovnis pasando por el cielo primero. Pero lo mismo en Roma, Venecia, Génova y Florencia. También en Siberia, de Moscú fue avistado por video observado 2 ovnis durante 3 horas. Más objetos fueron vistos en Londres, Australia, Canadá, Estados Unidos, Chile, México y Ecuador. Allí en Lima, cámaras de contacto registraron imágenes de una nave nodriza causando asombro entre la población. Esta noche registramos otro avistamiento en dirección natural. Los objetos luminosos se movían extrañamente, encima junto a
la policía está en maniobras en el cielo de Yemen, donde abren llamadas en cuenta de avistamientos de ovnis hacia el mar.
Speaker was a captain in the US Navy at the time of the Philadelphia experiment. He was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He knows more about it than anybody else, and he knows a lot about it that a lot of people don't know. He's a very interesting man. We actually travelled around a little bit a few days ago together, and Al was telling me of some of his experiences over at my place. And I must tell you, my hair was standing on end from what I was hearing. I didn't know quite what I thought of what I was hearing. And the nun that lives in the flat next door to me was fortunately away because she would have known where to go with it. It's fascinating stuff. You will find it riveting, I'm sure. Would you please give a big Queensland welcome to Mr. Al Billick.
It looks like I'm all set up here with coffee, water, and whatever else I need. The Philadelphia experiment. How many people have heard of it in here in the audience? Well, that's amazing because when I first started lecturing on this subject, which was back in 1989, an audience of about 200 people, I asked how many people had heard of the Philadelphia experiment. About 3 people raised their hands. Now it's the other way around. The Philadelphia experiment required that name in the final phases of the testing, which was, of course, at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, but it didn't begin there. It actually has a long history. It goes back to 1931, and the original people involved were Dr. Nikola Tesla, Dr. Emil Kurtenauer, a staff physicist at the University of Chicago, and Dr. John Hutchinson, who was then dean of the engineering section of the university. Tesla traveled a lot. He went to Chicago, he kicked these ideas around. How do you make an object invisible? It was quite a bit in the popular press at that time, and during the 30s there were alleged photographs of people becoming invisible with special apparatus and this sort of thing. But they weren't talking about making a person invisible, they were talking about making a ship invisible, or a ship, or a merchant ship. And the idea first, of course, had to be proven as to whether or not it would work. The research work started at the University of Chicago, didn't get very far with it, it was mostly a paper study. Then in 1933, the Institute of Advanced Study, which was at Princeton University, came online. And of course, at the same time, essentially, Franklin Delano Roosevelt became the 32nd President of the United States. Now, Roosevelt already knew Tesla because back in the years of World War I, Roosevelt was Under Secretary of the Navy, and Tesla was asked to do more work for the government at that time, which he readily accepted and did a number of interesting things. There's a long history of Tesla. I won't go into it now on some of the other participants. I'll leave that for the workshop or for my videotapes, in which it's fully detailed. But Tesla originally came to the United States in 1884. Had an interesting history of involvement of various people, being cut off of funding, running his laboratories in New York. And of course, during that war period, he met Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In 1933, Roosevelt invited him back to Washington and asked him what he was doing and so forth. And after some conversation, suggested that maybe he should be the director of this project of invisibility, as they called it then. It had no formal name other than Project Invisibility. It was sort of a nickname project. So he became director. The interesting part of that was Tesla had an honorary degree as a doctorate. He had no real degree whatever. He never finished his schooling back in Europe. His father died first. Everyone else at the Institute had at least a PhD. And of course, this did create a little bit of friction, but Tesla was not a permanent member of the staff. He was not there except on a temporary basis, kept his other lab operations going, but nevertheless, he assumed the responsibility for these tests. They continued on with the theoretical work at the Institute after they moved out of Chicago. In 36, they had the first sort of test to see whether or not anything worked. They found out, well, it didn't really do very much, but maybe we're working in the right direction type thing. From the beginning, because of Roosevelt, the Navy was interested in this project. The Office of Naval Engineering, as they call it, and now it's the Office of Naval Research, funded it. They gave quite a bit of money under the table, so to speak, to keep this project going. So they were very interested in it from a military standpoint. The time rolled on, and 1940 came around. They had a new system, and they installed this on a ship in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, sort of out of sight to everyone. The Navy Yard is very large. And they had two adjacent ships, one starboard and one port, which held the heavy equipment, and special antennas on the small ship in the middle, which was actually a tender of about 350 tons. No one was on board the ship for the test. They turned all the equipment on. Of course, it worked very well and very successfully. The ship became visible to sight. They weren't concerned about radar in 1940 because that was not yet a major military system. It became so in the next few years. But at that time, they decided, well, we got something that works here. Everybody was happy. Everybody was elated, from the Navy to Roosevelt. So Roosevelt said to Tesla, he says, well, it's been successful. I'm going to give you a real ship to make invisible. I'm giving you a battleship. They moved into the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And Roosevelt's words were, if you can make a battleship invisible, you can make anything invisible. So at that point, Tesla went to work on that project. Now, to backtrack slightly, how did I get involved? And for that matter, how did my mother get involved? I was not born in Elm Village. I was born Edward Cameron, son of Alexander Duncan Cameron Sr., who was a Navy man himself during the period prior to and during World War I. Retired from the Navy in 1929 with a medical condition and a pension. And there are many slides to cover this. I'll get into those a little bit later. But he, of course, in the period of his Navy activities, not really like most Navy men, have a girlfriend in every port. He was a very good-looking man, and he had women chasing him. Wound up with a woman who was my mother. I was born 4 August 1916, and Duncan was born in May of 1917 from a different mother. I was born in Bayshore, Long Island, and Duncan was born someplace in Connecticut. Well, father, in the period of time from 1917 on, was called out to sea by the Navy. There was a war on going to sea. And he abandoned his 2 living Commonwealth wives. Duncan and I were raised by Andy Arnold in a big house in Long Island. They had a 23-room mansion. And I was supported by the family business, Arnold Constable and Company, a department store in New York, several stores really, founded in 1855 by Mr. Constable, who came from England and brought over his associate from England, who was later a very successful business, made lots of money. So the family did not look like funding for anything. We went through our regular normal schooling, finished high school 2 years early. Father insisted all during this period we must get a good education. He did not get beyond high school himself at Loyola High, I believe, in Brooklyn. But he wanted us to have a very good education. Of course, the money was available and family had stature, so I went to Princeton. Took a bachelor's degree and a master's degree there. Of course, during that period, met Dr. John Van Neumann, who figured very heavily in the experiment later on. And he insisted if I were going to go on for a PhD, which I intended to do, that it would be better if I went to Harvard. He said it's a better school, more prestigious, et cetera, et cetera. So I went to Harvard. Took my PhD in the summer of 1939. And Duncan, in the meantime, decided to take off to Scotland. The University of Edinburgh in the north of Scotland. Why I still do not know to this day. Probably he wouldn't tell you either. But that's where he went. Took his degree work there, and we were both completed with it. Father, who was out of the Navy and retired from 1930 January onwards, he used to build lots of racing ships, racing regattas in Long Island. Picked me up, took me over to Scotland to meet Duncan, and we went on to Germany. See my mother, the last time I saw her was 1939, living in the family castle in what was eastern Germany, is now called Poland. What was called Königsberg is now under a different name in Russia. Mother has long since returned to the U.S. She was a native here, and how this all occurred, I do not know. But I met her there. That was the last time I've seen her. I've since learned she is still alive. She's 98 today. I'm not in the best of health. But in any case, we returned to the United States, and with father's insistence, we joined the Navy. 50 Church Street, New York. We were given commissions, Lieutenant JG, because of our education. And of course, we didn't know the father had already set us up for a special project. He didn't tell us. In any case, we went through a 90-day winter school training in the Navy for officers who would be assigned to a very special project of some kind. So we finished that. In January of 1940, we were assigned, of course, to the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton. So here were 2 fresh, young Navy men, PhDs in physics. We thought we knew it all. So we go to the Institute. And then we find out how much we don't know. Because the cutting edge of science and mathematics at the Institute was many years ahead of those strong universities. We were dealing with things like 5-dimensional realities, time fields, and a few other things we'd never heard of, and for that matter, much of that is still not heard of today in the public domain, nor even among many scientists. That's so far advanced they were, and how much secrecy has come down since. At that time, there was no secrecy. The project was wide open. Nobody was interested in it particularly, but it was a wide open, unclassified project with the Institute. Well, it went on from the period in 1940 up until the test in September, at which time it was classified. The Navy took it over, and it became known as Project Rainbow. That was the official title, which lasted in that category of that title until 1947. The test was made at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was entirely successful. Vessel was given this battleship to make invisible. And here you're going from a ship with 350 tons up to something like 30,000 tons, slightly larger. required a lot more power for the test. There wasn't much power required for making that smaller ship invisible. They still could take any chances at that time with personnel on board. Tesla was given this task and he assumed it and decided I would design all kinds of new equipment. Comes January 1941. It seems the Navy decided Duncan and I had to go to sea to learn what it was all about to be an officer in the Navy. So we were assigned to the USS Pennsylvania. Over this, we floated all around the Pacific. It was an interesting tour. Much of anything, it was rather a plush assignment. The Pacific, the Pennsylvania comes into Pearl Harbor in October of 1941 to go into dry dock in Overhaul. So we took leave and then we finally went to San Francisco and we had quite a ball in San Francisco. I still remember some of those days. On the 5th of December 1941, our orders were cut to return to Pearl Harbor. We were about to board a plane at the Alameda Naval Air Station when we were stopped. The naval captain came up to us and said, "Your orders are canceled, come with me." He followed us to an upstairs room in the Naval Air Station. We met Noble and Senior, who was then director of the Office of Naval Engineering. And he told us this: "Gentlemen, we don't want you going back to Pearl Harbor. We have reason to believe the Japanese will be attacking Pearl Harbor within 48 to 72 hours. Yes, they knew about it in advance. Make no mistake about it. Don't go into politics. In any case, we don't want you going there. Stay here in San Francisco, finish up your tour time in Pennsylvania. This is its home port anyway, so you can do some paperwork here for it the rest of the time. Go out and have a ball. It's in January, go back to the Institute. And of course, in January we did. January 42. The preparations for the test of the battleship, to me now England known, were well underway and nearly complete, and Tesla was having a lot of misgivings about it. The reason he was having misgivings were because he realized enormous amounts of power with the approach that was used at that time were required. And he knew there would probably be some sick and undead sailors. He asked the Navy for more time, because they had scheduled the test for March 42. He says, "I'm sure this problem can be solved, but I need more time to do it." Well, the Navy's typical response at that time is, quote, "If the war on," unquote, which it was. And we weren't doing too well on that. And we got a test date. So we worked rather feverishly. In the meantime, he had finished his work with RCA. It's another part of his history, but he was the Director of Engineering and Research worldwide for the last 4 years of his career at RCA. Joined RCA in 1919, retired in 39. Had a big party for him down in New Jersey at one of the facilities for RCA. But he had many other projects going, but he developed more of an interest and much more time was available for his work with the Philadelphia experiment. So he continued to look at this, and he had a very bad choice to make, an unhappy one. His decision was perhaps the thing which he thought was the best. He had a choice of either going ahead with the test and hoping everything would come out all right, or to play it safe, sabotage the test, and no one would be hurt, and he chose the latter course. He sabotaged the test, nothing happened on the appointed day. Some equipment blew up, but nothing else. Nobody was hurt, no one was injured. And of course, he bowed out. For the first time in his career, he had to say the project was a failure. Of course, he made it that way himself. He had an absolutely perfect track record to that day, never failing on the project that he undertook. So there's a very good man here. You take over, Dr. Jonathan Neumann. Jonathan Neumann was one of the original 4 staff members who joined the Institute of Advanced Study in 1933. So when Neumann took over, and tells the Navy, I had to look at this to see what's wrong. It didn't take long to find out what was wrong. But he decided to avail himself of the time to redesign the project, redesign the equipment. He partially redesigned it, not totally. And of course, time went on during that period, and he decided that during that summer he wanted a special ship. He didn't want to go ahead with the battleship tests. And he wanted a special ship designed from the ground up for his tests. So we went to the Newark shipbuilding yards, not far away, picked the number off the drawing board, which was then just in the process of having the keel laid, DE-173. DE is destroyer escort. They built lots of them during World War II, and after World War II. And he says to those who were in charge of the shipbuilding, the design, says, I want certain changes made. Of course, the Navy concurred with all this. Don't finish gun turret number 2 or 4. Leave a hole open down below decks. You follow it up, finish and put in some steel rails where you can load up some very heavy equipment. And otherwise, it would look like a standard destroyer. This is where the unfinished turret, you can build a wooden turret to fill up that hole and make it look like it's complete. So they did all this work during the summer of 42, September, shipping down the ways and immediately to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, where of course we wanted to dry dock to outfit the very heavy equipment. Heavy equipment running 8 megawatt diesel electric generator, the ship's power was totally inadequate for handling these tests. Even lots of power from the pressure. And of course, 2 very large alternators, 75 kVA each, vertical shaft mounting, 2 gearboxes, motor drive, associated heavy electronics, all the ground the whole of the ship. They wanted it in the hold, unlike the battleship last year on the deck when we were about to put up the battleship to this equipment in it. This equipment was to be built into the hold of the ship later on the others. That took place between September and December of 1942. And then the ship was taken out of dry dock and put in the back section of the Philadelphia Navy Yard with classified work on it. And then he outfitted it with the rest of the electronics. Jonathan and I became part of that team. We were involved with this thing very heavily, going back and forth from the Institute to the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And they continued to outfit the ship, make subsection tests. And this went on into 43. Until actually January they started putting the rest of the equipment in. So we were there. And we reminded Mr. Dr. Jonathan Neumann what Tesla had said. We didn't want to hear about it first. We had something of a disdain for Tesla because he quoted that 3 and 4. Eventually got over it. Everybody knew Tesla had an impeccable track record. His theoretical concepts of what he was doing were perhaps well beyond some of the mathematics of the day. But he would eventually agree that might be a problem. Well, they went through the preliminary tests and they went on to do May. They had problems. They decided to put in a 3rd alternator to try and build a counter field to perhaps compensate for the other ones being generated. They knew what they were generating with the torus-like field that surrounding the ship. They're extremely high power. Their generator didn't work. We managed to zap one of the sailors working with us as a technician. He wound up in the hospital. When he came out of it, he was discharged. We went on with this, and eventually all the equipment was installed. They did a shakedown cruise of the Eldridge, which had passed very nicely. And on July 22nd, they decided to have the first test. There's also, I should add, a test group. During that summer to fall period of 1942, the Navy asked for volunteers, about 33 volunteers for a special project. They had been specially selected to meet certain requirements, both physically and mentally. We weren't told what the project was. Whether it's hazardous, we get hazardous to be great. They went their special crew. It went through 90 days of training. After Grover, Connecticut Coast Guard Academy. And of course, they had that class time. He was out of the Navy, but he enlisted in services, not formally, but they enlisted the services in the Coast Guard during the war for 3,000 hours volunteer. He's still great and wanted to do something. They graduated, they were signed to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and of course, when the time came for the test crew, it consisted of 15 enlisted men and 10 officers. Among those 10 were Duncan and I, who were in the equipment of the Eldridge. We had no computer in those days, so I really had to be run manually. And requested a certain sequence that we run. And we knew what it was, and obtained the test for 22 July 43 by radio link from the command ship, which was a carrier. The man from the Navy in charge of these tests was Captain Harrison. The Navy was quite proud of him. He was the first full-blooded Indian ever to make line officer rank. And he gave the instructions. Everything was turned on in sequence. We turned all the equipment on. We didn't see anything from inside the hold of the ship, but from the carrier, they saw the ship go invisible. Couldn't see it. And for that matter, couldn't see it on radar, which was what they really were concerned about then, because by 43, we had very excellent radar, and so did the Germans. The basic name of this game was to try and make a ship or a whole fleet of ships invisible so the German radar couldn't pick it up, because they were sinking half of our shipping coming across the Atlantic to England. A rather high toll rate. Well, the hardware worked, but the human element failed. In the first test, there were quite a few nauseous sailors. After 20 minutes, the equipment was ordered to shut down. And I radio, and of course the ship was ordered back into the back section of the Philadelphia Navy Yard. It was then they found out that the sailors stationed on deck to view what was going on and to see what they could see, and the observers on deck were very sick, very nauseous. The amount of power required to produce the effect at that time with the approach that was being used was enormous. We were talking megawatts of power. Peak pulse power of the 4 transmitters, about 8 megawatts, plus 275 kVA overmeters cranking out thousands of amps into the 4 coils on the deck, which were tapered. They were conical coils which stood about this high off the deck. They were narrow at the top, and they tapered on down. Tesla-like tapered coils. It's one of the things which he had done for years. That's a matter of engineering. And of course, they were single churn copper tubing with 1 3/4 inches in diameter, and they were liquid cooled because they got hot. 4 of them, independently fed, and they were phased in a manner to produce a rotating magnetic field. And inside of it was a special quadrophase antenna designed by Jim Townsend Brown, another one of the contributors, which was fed by 4 RF transmitters plus all of the preceding electronics, which provided a pulsed form of power, 10% duty cycle. And the antennas were driven in such a manner with the electronics that they produced the rotating fields. Both fields counterclockwise. I'll get into more of the details of that in the workshop. But that was the basic field structure. The power required was enormous because of the approach. And unfortunately, the human mind, the human brain, and the nervous system can't take that kind of power level very long. There was, in a sense, virgin territory. We had no prior history as to what the human nervous system could or could not take. And this is one of the things they found out in the process of those tests, the multiple tests. The human nervous system can take just so much and it collapses or burns out if the power is high enough. Many of the sailors and all the sailors on the deck essentially were nauseous, but there were others below deck who were very unharmed, and of course Duncan and I were behind the steel bulkhead, so we didn't feel anything. At that point, Van Wyman knew he had to do something to redesign the system, and he went to the Navy and asked for more time. Navy told him nothing at first. And demurred, they didn't give any answer. And about the 1st of August, they came back to him and said, all right, you have until the 12th of August 1943 to complete these tests or forget it. Well, that's what we call a drop dead test date. Do it by then or don't do it at all. Somebody knew Von Neumann's mentality and knew very well that he would take until the last possible minute all the time he could. We worked around the clock. He said, well, there's one other change you can make. We don't really want optical invisibility. We only want radar invisibility. That was a minor change. Didn't really cut the power down. But that's what they decided they wanted. Of course, came the 12th of August, and I might add, by the 9th of August, many of us in the crew knew something was very wrong. That's that gut feeling. I might add that if you're exposed to that level of power for very long, if it doesn't fray the nervous system first, you wind up being very sensitive and rather psychic. It's one of the ways you can induce psychic sensitivity. High levels of RF and magnetic power at the appropriate frequencies. Not a good way to do it, but it works. We were all sensitive to the fact that something was drastically wrong. None of us knew what. The slides will get into that a little more. But between the 12th of August, we went to proceed with the tests. By that time, they had 3 observer ships, a different carrier. Captain Harrison was still in charge, and Neumann was on deck. They had a Coast Guard cutter, and they also had a commercial merchant ship by the name of the SS Ferriesat. And there was a man on board, Carl Allen, who was not a seaman, as others writing something of the history of this back in 1979, or attempted to write the history early support. Did not know all of the facts. Carl Allen was a naval officer. He was also a physicist. He was stationed on the Ferriesat as an observer. Later on, he went up in Los Alamos for the One Project, and he is, I might add, dead today. They had these observers to scout them around, and of course, we were finally given our orders to return on the equipment. So we did. For the first 70 seconds, to those observers who were stationed on the carrier deck, everything seemed to go the way it was desired to go. Namely, the ship was radar invisible. They couldn't find it through radar, but you could still see it vaguely through a greenish haze. Now, I might add, in both tests, it produced an area of invisibility in the water, considerably larger than the hull of a ship. So if you couldn't see the ship, you could look for the water line in the invisible part of the bay. It was deep enough there that they couldn't even find where the bottom of this thing went, the so-called invisible section of water. But in that second test, after 70 seconds, there was a blue flash of light and the ship disappeared, the water line disappeared, and it was gone. Totally. They knew it was gone because there's no water line. They could not raise anyone on the radio. So they're all tearing their hair out and biting their fingernails or whatever else they do under those circumstances. And approximately 4 hours later, the ship returned to the same point from which it had disappeared. So then looking on the deck through the binoculars to try and raise anyone on the radio. They got no response by a radio. And looking through binoculars, they could see pandemonium on the deck. Part of the antenna as part of the test system was missing, and things just didn't look healthy. So they ordered the boarding party to board the ship, with two-way radio, of course. They boarded the ship and looked around. They reported back and found the 2 sailors buried in the steel deck, their bodies intermingled with the steel behind. 2 more upright and standing in the bulkhead. And both of them were dying. One of them was a younger brother, Jim Cameron, enlisted in the Navy after 12 hours, which was 6 years younger. He died among the others. 5th man had a hand buried in the steel bulkhead. I was always buried in, so he cut his hand off and gave him an artificial hand later. He lived. They looked at this mess. I was there, and they said something about it. Something was missing. And of course, the Navy calls a board of input. 4 days. The Navy loves boards of input. This went on for 4 days, and I gave my report for shit into the teachers these reports. They didn't really know what to do at first. They finally decided they would have a 3rd test further down in the harbor, which was conducted late October.
All right, Curtis, to answer your question, we're going to go ahead and go into the alien agenda. It's we're going to do a little bit of discovering the alien agenda. We're going to walk out of this UFOs all over the world. But in the meantime, I live right on this, and I think strange things around here. Yeah, I know, right? I mean, I live right here in Shelby, Alabama, which is right here on that 33rd parallel. And I've seen UFOs. I've seen them. And they're like the size of softballs. And they move and they fly around and they move fast. They don't make a sound. But you can sense them. You can sense something's there. I've seen clouds materialize out here in Shelby materialize like a kerosene lantern when you first light it, that black smoke. I've seen a materialized storm come together like a dragon. I saw a dragon in the cloud. It was pretty amazing. But anyway, let's just get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and bust out the intro song for UFOs all over the world. Enjoy. UFOs all over the world. 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 UFOs all over the world.
Put the ship on station, no one on board, remote and entire crew after the ship was on station, and run over the control systems by a remote cable over 1,000 feet long to an adjacent ship. At the appropriate time, they turned on the equipment by remote control, and of course the ship disappeared. Came back later with smoking equipment in the hold, and some of it was missing, and they boarded the ship and scrapped the project, so that's enough. And send the Eldridge out to sea. Of course, they had to rebuild it first and finish the unfinished sections, which they did. The Civil War service from 1944 to 1946. The Eldridge then went into mothballs and was there until 1951, and the Greeks were given the Eldridge and another ship as part of a ceremony where Truman turned over some of our surplus ships to the Greek Navy. Remained with the Greeks up until 2 years ago. had a bit of a problem tracking this down, but it seems like the Greeks kept it as a training ship. They didn't take good care of it. And regularly it was rotting. 2 years ago, the Navy approaches the Greek Navy, and the Greek government says, we want the Ulrich back. We didn't give it to you, it's ours. They didn't ask for it back, they demanded it, and they got it back. The Greek Playboy magazine, believe it or not, published the pictures and story of the Ulrich in the issue of 1 year ago, last October, which I had. And the photos show the Ulrich in rather sad shape. They towed it across the Atlantic. It didn't go under its own power, from what I was told. Wound up at Norfolk, Virginia, being rebuilt. Don't ask me why they wanted to rebuild it, but that's what they're doing. The word I have is they're putting a new hull under it because the hull was rotten. The superstructure wasn't too bad. Whether they want it for a museum piece or for other purposes, I do not know. I wanted to get into Norfolk before I left Atlanta, but I was not able to do it. I might at a later date see if I can find the ship. It does not show from aerial photographs of it flown over a commercial airliner without pictures of Norfolk. That basically was the history of the Ulrich. Now, what happened so far as Duncan and I were concerned in the interior of the ship in the control room. While we turned the equipment on, as per instructions, everything seemed to be all right for about 30 seconds. And then we started to notice some very peculiar effects. The field coils of those two generators was 5 fields per generator, alternator really. So there's 10 field coils to be driven by banks of electronics, 300 6L6 tubes per field coil. We had 3,000 of those things in various parts of that compartment and elsewhere in the ship. Believe me, they generate a lot of heat, quite a bit of light. But what was peculiar was the light output from those tubes, because they were glass, varied. Normally they're quite stable. They started getting brighter and then getting dimmer. What's going on here? Something's wrong. Next thing that happens is we get high voltage arc over, or what we assumed was high voltage arc over, internally in the control room. And there was no high voltage equipment there. The arcs were jumping across the room. In retrospect, I can say it was not high voltage electricity, it was an etheric type discharge. We didn't know what it was at the time. But we did know something was wrong. We could raise no one on the radio. So it was up to us to do whatever we thought best. We went to the main AC power control systems to shut all the power off, and those cotton pickers were frozen solid. We couldn't move the handles, we couldn't do anything with it. Conditions were getting worse in the interior. We decided it was time to get out of there, so we opened the bulkhead door, go out on the deck of the ship, and we both get the bright idea at the same time. There's something wrong here, let's jump overboard and swim ashore. We were both good swimmers. But I might add, at that time, we could not see anything, whatever, beyond the railing of the ship. Everything on the ship and to the railing and slightly beyond appeared normal. Beyond the railing and ship any distance was solid gray, couldn't see a thing. Nevertheless, we jumped overboard. We didn't hit the water. We kept falling and falling and falling like you're going down an elevator shaft with no bottom. Eventually this stopped, and we wound up standing on dry ground at night. We didn't know where we were. And a chain link fence to our background, which we recognized as a military fence. And suddenly, out of nowhere, comes a blinding searchlight beaming down on us from up above. Well, it was mounted on a helicopter, but we didn't know what a helicopter was because in 1943, Sikorsky and others were still playing with helicopters and making a viable product. Nevertheless, we were quickly picked out by MPs. We did recognize what they were. And we were grabbed and we were taken to a building. We went in the building door, to an elevator, down several levels of the elevator. Door opens. We see a lot of military personnel, some civilian personnel, lots of strange electronics, and an elderly gentleman with graying white hair approaching us, most of them missing. He walks up to us and says, "Gentlemen, I've been expecting you." I'm Dr. John Von Neumann. You look at him and say, "You're who?" I said, "I'm Dr. John Von Neumann." Couldn't be. We left him an hour or so ago. He's a much younger man. Well, this very strong brogue, which comes out of Europe, he said, "Gentlemen, I am the same Dr. Von Neumann you knew in 1883. I'm talking Long Island." We didn't believe him. We thought he was a little bit bad, but he wasn't, as we found out subsequently. They gave us the cool story of the underground. The first thing that hit us was all kinds of modern computer systems, which we didn't know what they were because there were no computer systems in 43, other than some very strange calculating machines built at Harvard, an analog machine and one electronic machine at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, right? Which was not a computer, it was a calculator. If we look at all this modern equipment, tape drives, hard disk drives, display systems, large screen display systems, and they gave us a bookstore. We saw a lot of things we didn't know what it was. Finally, they sat us down in front of large screen color TV. Now, 1943, what did we have for TV? Small 10-inch square tubes, black and white. There was no color in those days. It was still highly experimental, being played with in laboratories, and it really didn't get anywhere, so it was left the war. There it is, and we see it, we sit down, and we watch. Rather upset by this point, and rather confused, both of us, not myself. So we start watching TV, and we sit there, like anyone does, we start watching TV. The thing that got to us after discussions about man in the moon, the Cold War, and use of modern cities and modern freeway systems, none of which existed in 43, what really got us was the commercials. On your next trip, on vacation trip to Hawaii, why not fly with us on our 747 jet? Because advertising for a particular airline, such as American Air. And they show a picture of the 747 jet flight. What the hell is this? Maybe the old man is right. Well, we went back to him. We finally were convinced that it was Van Neumann, number one, and number two, we weren't in our normal time frame. We actually did go above base during the day. We found out that we arrived at 2 a.m. approximately that morning of 12 August 1983 at Montauk. We were there about 12 hours, plus during the daylight hours, we went above base. They gave us a small tour, but we were never allowed off base. Out of this night. Finally, Dr. Van Neumann says to us, he says, well, gentlemen, we have a real problem. Okay, what is it? He says, these two experiments, we were running one here at Montauk, Long Island. He says, we can control space and time. And he says, this experiment and these things we're doing here locked up with the Eldridge. And the Eldridge was yanked out of its harbor into hyperspace. It's currently in hyperspace. We don't know how you got here when you jumped overboard, but you're here. Somebody has to go back to the ship and shut off the equipment. I looked at him and Dr. looked at him and he says, great, how are we supposed to get there? I said, well, you're the ones going to have to do it. And he says, we can get you there. We have complete control over space and time. We can send you anywhere as we want, at any time we want. This is a subject of the Montauk Project, which I'll come up with much more thoroughly in my workshop, because you have to know what it meant and what it was. But briefly, it was operating from 1976 to 83, and it had solved all the problems of transport of an object or a person through space and time at any point they wanted, either in our solar system or outside. And with some very, very sophisticated electronics, which involved aliens, part of the government agreement in 1954, which they were there with government approval. That I'll get into more later on Tuesday. In any case, he said, we'll send you back, and they did, to the decks of the Eldridge with instructions. Shut that equipment off any way you have to. Smash it if you have to. We did. Put on gloves, found access, and started chopping up electronic equipment, cables, and everything with instructions, certain pieces of equipment we do not destroy. When we had chopped up enough of it and cut the cable feeds and the drives to the field coils of the two major alternators, they started to wind down. And at the point when they started to wind down, we knew that essentially it was over. So we put down our gear and went out on deck. At that point, we saw two sailors buried on the steel deck. They were not buried at the time we jumped off the ship. But when we came back to the ship, they were. And of course, among that, we saw younger brother Jim buried in the bulkhead, and his head and shoulders were not in the steel. He was still able to articulate a bit. He was crying. I went over to try and comfort him. Don't take one look at this mess. Heads towards the rail. looks at me like, well, aren't you coming along? He jumped overboard before the fields collapsed and wound up back in Montauk, future as the saying goes, sometime between 82 and 83. We don't know the exact date. And he was there for quite a period of time until he had a problem. I remained with the ship. I gave my reports to the Navy. They didn't believe it. Dr. Van Neumann didn't know whether to believe it or not, because this is Van Neumann 43. The story gets a little confusing, perhaps, but that was what happened. I had made the round-trip circuit like Duncan from 43 to 83 and back to 43. He didn't know whether to believe me or not. He took me aside and says, all right. He said, I'm going to build a time machine. He said, the technology for that is very little different than what we're doing here in this project. What they were doing, of course, was creating an artificial time. An artificial time zone with very heavy electronics. And the field around the ship that looked more resembled a donut than anything else, a forest-like field, in which we created a local time zone. And that local time zone was slightly different than the one on the outside, which was the normal one that we always live in. The theory said, and they proved it, that if you rotate the time fields slightly, phase shifted, you will achieve invisibility because light waves or radar, which is essentially the same as light at a lower frequency, will pass right through the area. If it passes through it, there's no reflection, you don't see it. The basic idea of invisibility is that you get no reflection of any kind from the object that you're normally looking at. If there's no reflection, you can't see it. It doesn't matter whether it's light waves or radar, or lower frequency, electronic, or waves, even down sonar. No reflection, you don't see it. That was the basic premise. And it worked. It took enormous amounts of power. But he told me, he said, I will build a time machine. You're going to go back to the future and you're going to bring something back to prove to me that you were there and I was there. He did. He built the machine in the lab, sent me back on several trips to 83. On the last trip, I remember what I brought back, and I don't know why that was adequate to satisfy him. It was a Life magazine, some specific issue. And he says, all right, I'm satisfied, I believe it. And he then discontinued that project, and he, of course, went on to the Los Alamos bomb project. He was there intermittently as a consultant. He helped develop the atomic bomb. I was floating around in the Navy. Duncan was gone. Nobody knew where he went or what happened, but he wasn't there on the ship. Not at that point. I was still in the Navy, and I was there. I had a pregnant girlfriend, and I married her in October of 1943, and son was born, Jeffrey Cameron, in 1944, February. The Navy didn't know what to do with me because here I was, and a witness to this thing, and I had a penchant for talking. And it already, without my help, had gone through virtually the entire Navy, including the Pacific Fleet, about this terrible experiment in Philadelphia. Everybody knew about the Philadelphia experiment. The Navy was aghast what they were going to do to cover it up. At that point, they couldn't. But they kept it very low-key and rather quiet, no publicity to it, what had inadvertently spread around the usual scuttlebutt of the Navy. Along about June 44, Van Neumann requested me to come up to Los Alamos to help with the project. The Navy was delighted because Los Alamos Laboratories at that time was the most secret and reclusive facility that we had at that time. Hardly anybody knew about it. So I went up there in July 44 with family. I remained there for 3 years. Van Neumann, of course, left the bombs developed and dropped, and other things happened. I incurred the wrath of certain fellow physicists there in arguments about whether or not certain follow-on devices after the atomic bomb should be developed, and I went against it. As was kind of Dr. Oppenheimer against the development of the hydrogen bomb. But some other things were discovered. I will go into in the workshop in the Black Vault, which I found when I started talking about things much I can keep my mouth shut. It was decided with a meeting of 3 special people what to do about me. They decided I had to go. July 4th, and the picnic was a holiday. Picnic with the family. Familiar little Navy gray bus drives up, and 2 MDs get out and address me. You're Captain Cameron? Yes. You're under arrest. Under arrest? What for? The charges espionage. We have to take you in. That was the last I told the family, including son Jeffrey, or Jess, I call him, who is still alive. And I was taken in, went to Washington, D.C. I expected a full court martial. The charges were dropped. The Navy said, we have a new assignment for you. Okay, where is it? It's at Montauk, Long Island. There's a Navy base out there at the extreme eastern tip, which was a fact. The military built an Army base known as Fort Hero, and the Navy had underwater submarine bands operating in the same area since approximately the beginning of the century. The project was completed between 1900 and 1905, and it was operational. I did not connect the fact that location, that Montauk, was the exact physical location at a later date of the Montauk Project, as we call it, which involved the time-space manipulation and all the other related projects which went on there, starting about 1968. Anyway, I was ordered out there. I was there a short while. I was ordered to stand in a particular traffic circle, surrounded by MPs. Don't move. With thrown weapons, you don't move. And suddenly I was not there. I was back at Montauk, the underground, in 1983. At that time, Van Neumann, who was a consultant only, essentially was a consultant at the time when we met the first time, which was 12 August 83 in the morning hours. I was sent back to Montauk, and I was told by him, Theodore Van Neumann, he says, I don't like what they're going to do to you. They want to get rid of you. They're going to strip you of your memory and your personality, put you in one of our neat little machines here for age regression, run you back physically to the age of a baby, perhaps 1 year, perhaps less. And because of what we have here, they'll shift you back to the past and plug you into another family and hope that you never remember anything of this. Well, I didn't. I did not remember my connections with the Philadelphia experiment until January of 1988. I do remember back to the time of the Christmas party, as I'll be like, not knowing at the time, in December of 1927, my name, well, the family members there, but most of those I knew later. And most of what they were talking about I understood, which is a little unusual for a 1-year-old kid. And I grew up in South York. I knew nothing about my past. Went to high school. Got out of high school. Joined the Navy. I was drafted, actually, in World War II, electronics, 45 to 46. Got out and tried to run a business. I failed, and so I went to college. And I went to New York College of Engineering for about 2 years, and eventually went to California to finish my education there, and then became a consulting electronic engineer from 1958 to 88. During this entire period, knowing nothing whatever of my past. So I had a fascination when I thought I'd experiment. So I sort of a compulsion to find out anything I could find out about it. I was part of Ivan Sanderson's team when he was alive, digging into this thing. We got nowhere. But eventually, January 1988, late one Saturday night, watching HBO television on a large wall projection system. 4 a.m. in the morning, Saturday night, I was about to retire, and they announced the next feature of this evening will be the Philadelphia experiment. This, of course, was a commercial movie produced and released in 1984, which I did not see at the time when it went around. I said, I've heard so much about this, I'll see it. So I did, for the whole 9 yards, which was commercial, in about 3 hours. But the first 15 minutes hit me like a bombshell because they portrayed the scenario in that movie, which is almost exactly the way things happened. Right down to the bar scene the night before. And the bar closed about 5-6 years ago. The Blue Lagoon was its original name. But that scenario was correct. Everything about the first 15 minutes was correct, except the crew. They showed 150 personnel. We only had a skeleton crew on board, and the date was August 12th rather than October. Besides those minor details, everything was correct up to the point whereas we're standing with our backs to the fence at Montauk, which we didn't know at the point of time we referred to that it was Montauk. We were captured by the EMPs. In the movie, of course, the helicopter that's overhead blows up and explodes and hits the ground, blows a hole in the fence, and of course the two heroes in the movie escape, and then it begins the Hollywood version, which had no reality whatever. And it was all over California, and eventually back to the secret base, which was in Windover, Utah, in the movie. Actually, back to Montauk, Rhode Island. That part was partly correct. But that first 15 minutes was the trigger to bring back the memories, which were probably near the surface anyway. And I remembered at that point, about 2 days later, hey, I had a family. I wonder what happened to the family. Oh yes, Dr. John Neumann was in charge of that project at that time. And he promised me if I ever remembered my being part of the project, he would call me within 72 hours. It took him 48 to try to contact me. I was living in Arizona at the time, and he was on the East Coast. He didn't know where to connect with me, so he went through connections with Preston Nichols and tried to get me, but I was not available that day. Happened to be a day I was in heavy lab work with the company I worked with at that time, which was the last job I had in '88. He made several attempts and did eventually meet him. But I might add that since he left the government service in the Montauk project when it crashed on the night of 12 August 83, said that I've had enough. I'm retiring, going to my little home upstate New York. And of course, he had a problem with a split personality, which got much worse. The governor pushed it a little bit to make sure that he didn't remember that he was Dr. John Neumann. Once in a great while, he would remember, but only when he left the area, would get in his car on a lark and drive to Long Island, then he would remember who he was, look up Preston, and try to find me. I've met him many times in his upstate New York home, and it's one of those little anecdotes on this. It's rather curious. I knew by then who he was, and the first time I finally got together with him, it took several attempts. We talked for about 3 hours. About halfway through this conversation, in which he was spieling off literally like a phonograph record, his escapades in New York as a surplus electronics dealer. His name was Howard Decker, I'm sorry. And he knew all of the right companies and the names of streets because I lived in New York and New Jersey, and I knew everything he told me was correct. Finally, in the middle of this, I asked him, Eric was his middle name, they like to use the name Eric. I said, Eric, what do you remember about the Philadelphia experiment? Never heard of it. Well, do you remember me? I said, yes, but I don't know where from. I couldn't erase that. Well, a lot has happened since then in the way of further research, but let me get into the slides here because there's a lot to show and I don't know where we'll get cut off on time. I'm looking at the time now. 25 minutes? Okay, that's enough to go through a good part of the slides. Let me fire it up and we'll give you some more background of what it was all about. Okay, I don't know how many of you here are familiar with the East Coast of the United States, but this was a map of the Philadelphia Camden area. And the actual Navy Yard, it's over here in this section down here. And that was, of course, is the Delaware River. And the Navy Yard was there and much of the facilities. And in the next slide, we have a little better view of it. This is more of a close-up. This again is the Navy Yard, and the facilities at that time were quite extensive. It's all shut down today. We had a seaplane base, that's closed. The main Navy Yard is there, it's still physically there. There are other depots which are no longer there used. But of course, the Philadelphia International Airport has been there to this day, and of course, it's heavily used. When I was living in Atlanta, it was very convenient for me and my roommate to go up to business into Pennsylvania, we fly into the airport and then to rent a car. You fly into the airport, they fly right over the Navy Yard. Got some wonderful pictures. 91, after my memories came back in 88, I started to do some research. In 91, with Preston Nichols, we drove all over the area and I took a lot of pictures. This is the main naval base entrance of the Philadelphia Navy Yard. It's hardly changed since the 40s. This was taken most conveniently from the railing of I-95, which did not exist in 43, of course, but they conveniently built I-95 and another bridge, a parking area on the bridge, so we could stop and take all kinds of pictures. It was very convenient for that purpose. The actual Navy Yard as it existed in 43 from this aerial photo is a bit different from today. This is the front section where we had our offices set up there in that L-shaped building. This was the unclassified section where many ships came and went, and from the windows up there we could see them coming and going. The classified work was carried on back here. Typically the Eldridge is parked in that berth, and this bridge is still there to this day, and that controlled access to the back section. And again, in 91, we took many pictures to show the size of the Navy Yard. In fact, that there were and still are a lot of ships in storage. There, of course, is the bridge, and that will control access to the back section. And today, the many ships in storage. This will give you something to view. This, of course, is the railing in the front foreground, which parallel the highway, and we just pull over by it and take pictures of the heart's content. From the air, however, one did get a better view. If we look down on it, all these pictures are not perfect, but we could see aircraft carriers which were sitting there parked. Later on, I have views of them from the water level. Many ships, various Navy ships of various types. Some of them were frigates, some were gunships. And as we found at that time in the last flights, there was very little activity in the yard. It's been closed for about 2 years with many ships in storage in the background. Even 2 battleships in storage sitting there. We flew over them. Let's back up one. This one back up probably. Nope, doesn't want to back up. No, I'm pushing the back button. It's not working. Yeah, it's forward. We've got a problem here, Phil. This thing is not working right. All right, now we go. Okay, hold there. That's good. Very little activity currently, none now. And as I started to say, the 1995, there was a convention I attended in Philadelphia in which one of the TV stations wanted to do an interview and a survey of the Navy Yard. Well, they couldn't get in by ground because it was sealed off, so we rented a launch and went by sea. We've got some interesting photos. From the water level, you look up at these ships, they're quite large. When you get underneath some of the carriers, they're enormous. You don't understand how big they are unless you're quite under them. And of course, the woman who was doing the narrating had no concept about some of the modern carriers like this. CB-60, I think it was, Forrestal, the size of it and how big it is with the flight deck up there. This is the bridge when you look at it from the water level, with a warning sign there, keep out, and so forth. We did not go through and under there because of the yard. It was, at least at that time, patrolled. This is the Fold Hall, which was the actual administrative center for the Institute of Advanced Study. It was completed in 1939, and after I realized my connections, I went back there to Princeton and all there to see what I remembered and what I could find. The 4 original founding members of the Institute of Advanced Study was Dr. Alexander, this was taken from a documentary, Dr. Einstein, and the famous pose, familiar one with the pipe. John von Neumann, that photo was taken in Europe before he left the United States. Dr. Oswald Bateman, whom I know very little. Those are the four original founders. There were many more after that, and many more projects. Dr. David Hilbert, a mathematician who figures very heavily in the background of the mathematics which led to this project. He developed 5 different systems of mathematics. The principal one was nicknamed Hilbert Space, in which he described multiple realities and how they could exist side by side, which was quite important in terms of the theoretical understanding of what we were doing. And that, as well as other highly advanced math, figured in the final analysis, and which led to hardware. T. Townsend Brown, who became associated indirectly with the project because he was a Naval Reserve officer who was pulled in the Navy in 1938 to work on the German magnetic mine problem, which he did solve. And the approach was quite similar to that which we used later. This is the library inside of the Ford Hall. One of the more concealed and lesser known people is a Dr. Norman Levinson. I finally found his books in the library there. 5 unclassified books on mathematics, very advanced. He was at MIT as a math professor until he died in '76. But the classified books, the important ones he did on time equations and time matrix, are still classified, and you can't find those in any normal literature listing. I wandered around the grounds, and this, of course, is part of the graduate building on the Princeton property. As you can see, it's very well maintained. It's a very elite school. There's lots of money. It's the second oldest university in the U.S., Harvard being #1 for being the oldest. And I wandered all through this place and around the property. And I saw this pine tree in the middle of that back courtyard, and I took a picture of it. Nothing to do with the experiment. I thought it was a nice tree. Had some memories for me, so I added it to the collection. But this is one of the study walls, very familiar to me. The important thing about this was as I wandered through it, all mahogany walls, mahogany tables, oil, artwork, originals hanging on the walls. It reeked of money. I mean, the students who went there came from families with a position on money. This was the original lab building, which we used in 1936 for a test. Today, it is rather a tumble-down shack and is used for storing the vehicles. It's no longer a lab building. It has been replaced by a newer one, which was finished about 1939. And this newer building I wandered through to see if anything in it was familiar to me, and it certainly was. I actually went down from the entrances over here, went down this hallway, and then there's a right angle bend, you go into the back, and there's a classroom in the rear. I walked in there, and there was a blackboard, much like what Dr. von Neumann used to growing both Duncan and myself up to speed on the mathematics. Well, we sat in this corner, and I swear that changed a bit since 41. The furniture seems the same, I know the windows are, and the paint is very old. Anyway, we sat there typically. I would be in one of the chairs, Duncan would be in the other. He was with me at the time while von Neumann lectured on what 5-dimensional mathematics is all about. Picture of Albert Einstein during that period. The picture was taken in July of '43. He was being visited by Navy people all the time. There were many other projects ongoing there. It was a think tank, the premier think tank of the United States at that time. There was much more going on than just the Philadelphia experiment. Einstein was the guy who sat on top of everything. He used the nickname of the General. You couldn't solve a problem, go see the General. Typically, after 2 weeks of head scratching and tearing your hair out, you go see him, he'd solve a problem in 25 minutes. This was the graduating class for the Eldridge. Now, this is rather interesting to note. There were some 33 people in here. They were non-coms down here. In the middle here is my father, who, of course, was in the Coast Guard uniform, volunteer service, and all the enlisted people back here. There's no other officers showing here. There's some non-coms. This guy is curious. The Navy was very rigid on the dress code. He had on Argyle socks, which is not exactly regulation. We've yet to figure out who he was, but it would appear that he was not real Navy personnel, but perhaps someone sent in by one of the agencies to watch an old experiment. Picture of the Eldridge as it was seen on September 12, 43, steaming in an unknown location. I wish to point out a few things on it. 4 gun turrets, number 1, number 2, 3, and 4. They were 3 inches. The larger ships later on, 5-inch turrets, fully enclosed. The main antenna mast, we had our special antenna, the invisibility effect mounted on top of that. The room where we had our controls and the control systems in there. And the 4 coils, as I mentioned, were set essentially symmetrically about that antenna mast. There were 2 on the port side, 2 on the starboard. And of course, the 2 across here were lined up, the 2 back here were lined up, so we were like a square, actually an oblong square, a rectangle. And those 4 coils were driven by the generators down in the hole down below. This is what the ship looked like in that particular shot. It had already been christened by September 12th. Actually, the only date that's in the Navy log that's correct is the August 27th date for christening at the Eldridge. It was after the 2 tests, including the disastrous one. These pictures fell here to me because of a man by the name of Phil Schneider. His father, Esperado Schneider, was the official MD in charge of the project. Esperado Schneider, this man here, is a Navy man who the Navy says was born, looking at the official record, in Chino, California in 1905, went to the University of Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, took his pre-med, and then went to Harvard for his medical school and joined the Navy and came up through the ranks. Bill says about 2 weeks before his father died, in the middle of quite some time, he confessed to the fact that he was a former German U-boat captain, had been captured by the French in 1940, turned over to the Third Army, and stayed there for a while, and someone negotiated for him to come to the U.S. and become a part of the United States Navy with the same rank that he had in the German Navy, that is, captain. He became a medical officer, medical corps. Now, there's some very strange aspects to that because I've read some of his handwritten notebooks, and I've never seen an MD that can handle mathematical equations like Pastor Schneider. So what he was in the German Navy before, other than captain, before he was captured, I don't know. There were other people in here who were very important. There was a Dr. Maxim in the background. There was a Dr. Senator Bush, who was a presidential advisor. I think that's him there, but I don't have a full runoff of names. And this man in the foreground is very interesting. The man's name, as I found out, was Don Thor, his brother Balfour, who had an office in the basement of the Pentagon during the period, around that period for about 2.5 years. Opposite Dr. Schneider's office, MD doctor, had an office in the basement. That was on the 9th of August when the picture was taken. The man who was lecturing was an Indian, a quantum of India physicist who was a specialist in subatomic particle physics. Exactly what they were lecturing on, I don't know. Most of the people in there were civilian. And the scientists were some statue of the truth. Another picture of him, the man there was probably, who it says, I don't know that was a fact, but many years later he wound up being the president of AIL, Airborne Instrument Laboratories in Long Island, which Preston Rickle worked for some 15 years. Dr. Schneider in his formal uniform of the United States Navy. And it's a little bit faint, but that was in the Pentagon basement office. On the other side of that wall was the office for Balfour. I mentioned this to Dr. Frank Stranges in Los Angeles, and they looked at me and said, how did you know that? He knew Balfour and has known for many years. Balfour and Balfour are the Venusians. Honest to God, the Venusians from Venus. Now, why they're here, I don't know. Why he became connected, that is, Balfour became connected to the project, I don't know either. It was. This was taken from a documentary which I held my hands on, dealing with the subject of code breakers. That was the formal title of the presentation on PBS out of WGBH Boston. The last part of it, they showed the capture of a German submarine. And then there, I'm going to have to send this through a special digital clarification. That man there looks to me very much like Oscar Schneider. They gave no nomenclature as to the date that ship was captured, who was on it, or the number of the ship either. What's important about Schneider's background and what I found was the correspondence he had with other people in the Navy. I think you can probably read this with my reiterating it, but You look at the date up there, starting in 1944, he's dealing with the subjects of the Eldridge, he called it the furnace set, which was a mistake. TE-173, the problems with the personnel, and the ship's log, and then everything was classified as top secret. And that was letter number 1. Letter number 2 deals further with the problems, and particularly the fact that they had some crew members escape. J.F. Beluga gets in on the act and classifies everything, and they want to send all of them down to Quantico, Virginia for psychological testing. Letter number 3, further detail, where they get up to a level 1A prime directive. They were really upset on what was going on with some of the sailors. Some escaped. You can probably see the date up there as 1954. This letter was to Dr. E.U. Condon, who was one of those on board the Eldridge for that 9th August briefing. He's going into the whole problem which was still plaguing them. And I guess there's some personal material down here about a project he was concerned with related to Tesla. But the 4th and final letter is the most interesting. Notice it's into the clearance level. There's a rhyolite clearance level, which I had somebody on the radio a month or so ago deny there was any such clearance. But Phil Schneider had a rhyolite 38. Don't know what clearance level his father, Oscar, had, but he's dealing with people at still higher level. He deals with the subject of an autopsy of sailor number 9. And what he found in the body, particularly in the cerebellum, a strange little object, about 1.25 long, 1/4 inch diameter, had a metal tip, and on that metal tip was some very strange writing, symbols which were not of this earth. And he asked, what is this thing? Nothing superior. It was buried in his brain, that sailor's brain, and he found 3 more in the same body. 4 total. We had no such technology in 1943. That gave final proof to me of the rumors I had heard those years. While the ship was in hyperspace, aliens came on board and examined the sailors and wanted to know what their ship was doing, where it was, and apparently implanted someone for perhaps future tracking. I don't know why. Nobody seemed to know at that time why. But I found this letter, that device, and his request to higher authority. What is this thing and what does it mean? And the whole series of correspondence is absolute proof. Not only the experiment happened, but they had some very serious problems in hyperspace. I'll go into that further in the workshop. Time's running out. But I wanted you to see at least those letters and the fact that there is proof of what happens and medical proof. Dr. Schneider retired in the experiment with the workings in the aftermath. After about 8 years, he joined the Navy team that was developed in the atomic sums of Nautilus. This was a launching of the Nautilus in 1960. Dr. Schneider is there, the 4th from the left. And he stayed in the Navy until he finally retired. This is Dr. von Neumann at an earlier date. He was happy. He gave a lot of parties in Princeton. When he wasn't working very hard, he was playing very hard. And at his parties, he used to model women's hats. Something really strange came along, such as this one. He had to wear it. Of course, then eventually, the project failed, and he went on to Los Alamos. And I was in Los Alamos in one of the picnics. And this picture was taken, it's actually in a textbook as well as a documentary. There's Dr. John von Neumann on the left, Dr. Stan Ulam on the right, and there's the young man in the middle who finally was able to identify. He does bear resemblance to what I looked like at the time. Was a Dr. Feuerman, who was a physicist. The 3 of them were taken with that picture of in Los Alamos. Neumann, as he was seen in 1945, not a very happy man. Then he went on to develop the modern electronic computer, and that was Dr. Goldstein on the right, and Neumann on the left. The computer was finished as working model in 52. They built a complete system, was given to the Navy in 53. I might add, Project Rainbow was shut down in 47 formally, was reopened in 1949 under the name of Project Mirage. Asked von Neumann to see if he could find out what went wrong and could he salvage anything. He did find out what was wrong. He did salvage it, designed a whole new system, which which was tested in 1953 on the carrier Midway. No personnel side effects. Everything went fine. Totally new approach, as far as I know. I was not part of it, so I don't know what they've done since. This is a model of the first working computer, which is now in the Smithsonian. Very crude looking by today's standards. But he created the first true computer because in the magnetic storage elements down below, he had the idea of the stored program. And that's what makes the modern computer a computer. You can store all kinds of programs. You can plug into them and tell the computer what programs you want to use as the calculations go on. Therefore, it's a true computer and not just a calculator. Neumann, as he got older, and became quite ill. He actually was dying of cancer. His picture shows he was in Congress testifying in 1956 in a wheelchair. Public record says that he died of cancer in 1957. Of course, they had a huge funeral for him and all of that. But what happened was the government couldn't let him die again. Well, they didn't let me die in 2003 because of the problems of being part of the time loop. So I found out later when Neumann knew about time traveling himself. And therefore he became part of the loop problem, as we call it. They cured him of the cancer, gave him a new name, Howard Decker, but he kept going on, working for the government, writing books under his own original name, and created quite a stir because formally and officially he was dead. But there were plenty of people who knew he was alive because he was still working for the government until he was free. This is his what was left of his home upstate New York. He had a fire in 1984, and so he had to leave the house as a formal residence. This is some of the backyard appearance. He went to the trailer, which you see there, and I quite car with one of my rental cars on one of my trips. It's interesting because a certain sequence of events that happened. This is Preston Nichols. This was Decker kneeling down, and one of the people visiting out there at the time to buy some of the surplus electronics he had. I want to point out a few features of Dr. von Neumann when he was younger. Very bushy eyebrows, fairly high forehead, nose somewhat protruding left ear, heavy nose, and heavy mouth and chin. And those basic characteristics don't change as you age. In 1993, it was, in November, we took Howard Decker out to dinner. And I got his permission to take pictures of him. Notice, heavy nose, somewhat protruding ear, most of the hairs along the sideburns are still there. The same chin structure, much heavier in terms of the jowl sinking. The jowl cast of the face is the same as the earlier one. Okay, notice again the nose, the chin, the mouth structure, and the ear. We know that is the same man, even though he's in hiding. And he runs under a false identity, which he is even not aware of most of the time. He wrote a lot of books. I'm going to get off very shortly, but I went through the computer listing of all the books. The first 5 on that list of no consequence in terms of dates. He wrote 15 books altogether over various compilations. The next section here, which will show separately on this page, you can read the dates. You'll find books written up in 1972. It's rather strange for a man who died in 1957. And one compilation done in 1980. There's even more interesting material about Neumann and his continuance. Preston Nichols, some years ago, bought in surplus houses a computer called the C100. It was built by Radian. And he looked at it, he got the manual with it, it's very interesting, but there's no name here, the engineer who designed this. We called up the company, not the history. We called them in the 1990s, so yes. It was 1980, this thing was designed. It was designed for the CIA, we sold it years to the CIA. Then we put it through Heathgate Company and sold it to kits to various people, and Bush discontinued about 87. Well, who designed it? I told him, I don't know, and let me check the records. Came back a couple minutes later, told Preston, yes, we found out who designed it, Dr. John von Neumann. He says, who? Dr. John von Neumann. He said, what happened to him? He said, we don't know. He left it in 1980. He turned up at a party pulled by JPL 1986 at the JPL facilities in California in Pasadena. A special celebration party for one of the probes, I think it was the Mariner probe, because the Mariner had designed the atomic power supply for it and passed the first phase of its testing and going through the solar system was about to leave. He was at that party, and a friend of mine, who we shall not name, was at that party. He was working at JPL at the time, and he said, Von Neumann was there. He says, "You're sure it was him?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I talked with him." He says, "What was the state of his mind at that time?" He said, "He was pretty well shot." Well, there's a lot more we can go on with here. I'm going to get cut off. We'll have to stop. I wanted back up one here. I'm sorry? All right. Back up. Come on here. Back up. All right. Here we go. In 1955, the Navy thought the whole project was a lit-up experiment and thoroughly buried. And it seems like a paperback book entitled The Case for the UFO, written by a rather well-known astronomer, appeared in paperback form on Admiral Firth's basket. And in the footnotes, handwritten, I described various things in outer space plus the Philadelphia experiment. Well, the code, as the Navy loves to do, another little board of inquiry. Only this one involved a lot of other people from the Navy. This was Dr. Marvin Brown, Mr. Stanton in the background, chairman of the Bureau, was this involved Bureau Corporation. They mentioned to reprinted that book in the notes. This was George Coover, who was a Navy man at that time. I finally did track him down and ask him what he knew of this meeting. He said, "Well, yes, I remember it." He said, "What was most interesting in the history of this whole thing was the medical records." And I said, "No." He said, "Yes, there were 3 sets of medical records. I read them. They were the most interesting thing out of just the history of the experiment." The thing about the diet, of course, was the popular diet was including some books. In 1978, a book entitled Thin Air, which was a fictionalized version of the Philadelphia experiment. What was the action? 1979, the Philadelphia experiment project was visibility by Burroughs and more books about Burroughs during introduction. We all previously didn't know anything about what happened except something happened. In 1990, I made a book from Grant Steiger entitled Philadelphia Experiment and UFO Conspiracies. In 94, a 4th edition of the story was printed under the title The Philadelphia Experiment Chronicles by Commander Rex. Commander Rex is a pseudonym for Tim Beckley, who owns the publishing company. I did not write that one, but used the material. That covers a little bit in the waterfront. Now, back in the picture, the gentleman standing behind my father, I sort of thought I knew. This man was my roommate, who's now dead. This is June 8th, 96. I met him some years ago and had an offer one night, but had to leave Phoenix to move into this house in Atlanta, which I did. And during the period of time which I knew him, he was never extreme sensitive. This is what he looked like generally in the period around 93, 94, and the first car was his, and I'm still driving it. And we made a trip upstate New York. We stopped in Pennsylvania. This is Noel Sunday. Really, PA, we were snowed in for 3 days, 36 inches of snow. We finally got out from upstate New York and came back. On the way back, we had to turn the car in, of course, at the airport. We got gassed up, we're heading back to the airport, and we saw this sign, Preston's Diner. We got time to stop in and have a sandwich. So we did. This is what the diner basically looked like, one of the old designs. Stainless steel with a brick base. We go in and sit down, sitting there with sandwiches. There about 2 minutes, I start to get pretty twitchy and nervous. There's something strange about this place, is what I said. I'm watching my former roommate, Peter Sopel was his full name. Not only twitching, he's starting to dig in his pocket for something. I finally asked him, "What are you digging for? What are you looking for?" He said, "Cigarettes." I said, "You don't smoke." That was when it hit me. He was doing a replay. August 1943, which he said was 3 days before the test. So we were in there that night. He says, I was terribly nervous. I knew something was terribly wrong. I said, yeah, I'll go through in there that night. There's some loud screaming in there over the period of time. Because the diner was a 24-hour diner in those days. Right outside the back gate of the Navy Yard. And he says, oh, I knew something was wrong with it. We all did, I suppose, but he says, I couldn't figure out what it was. We looked out the window, it was daylight, and across the street, at the present time that is, diagonally across the street, was a church. We looked at that and said, oh yes, St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius said, yes, that was the name of the church at that time, but it was directly opposite the diner. Well, this time when we went in, it was not. It was out of order, we had to block up. So as we left, we asked the management, what do you know about the history of the diner? He said, well, it's been in the same location for 25 years. I said, well, where was it prior to that? He says, about half a block north of here, and where the parking lot is now, directly opposite the church. In fact, he has 8 members. That is the only time I ever remember this connection, in a prior lifetime, of course, with the Philadelphia experiment. And I found it rather significant. That was the original sign, rather weathered. I don't know how much time we had to get into family connections, but in terms of my family, that was my grandfather, Edward Cameron, 15-year picture taken in 1891, quite a few years ago. This was father, taken in 1901, when he was 10 years old. He was born in 1891, and passed on in 1981, according to official records, so we found since he lived about 5 years after he was officially dead. Getting quite a problem for him. This was taken when he was in the Navy in 1917. You can see the senior down here is a bosun's mate first class. He was not an officer. It's the only picture we have of him in the Navy, but none of the records have all disappeared. But the town historian had some of the records and knew that he left the Navy in 1929. During that period, when the war was on, he disappeared and went to sea, and he never after only saw him typically once a year, usually around Christmas. They used to have a Christmas party, and they dropped an eye